Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Magnifiers Gaming here, and today we're going to be talking about magnified optics in airsoft and if they are worth it or not. Specifically, the flip to the side G33, G43 style flip up optics. Are they worth it? Short answer, no. Long answer, it depends, of course. So today we're going to be talking about only this little guy here today because that's all I have. But I can touch a little bit on low-powered variable scopes. So the ones that look like sniper scopes, but they're not quite sniper scopes. And here in Japan, you actually often see people use them a lot. And I think that has a lot to do with play styles. And that's why I think it depends on your play style and how you want to play. So from my experience, I've noticed that when I use a magnifier, me as a player, I tend to become way more passive. I tend to just sit at a power position or choke or whatever, and I don't really move because I feel like I have this dominance and this need to just kind of hold this position here. And because of that lack of field of view, I'm too scared to kind of push around because I have this thing on. And the only time I would ever actually use the one times, no magnification optic, is if I was in CQB, and I didn't like that for my playstyle. I'm more of a kind of, not run and gun, but I do a lot of moving around. As you guys have seen in my videos, I like to take ground, I like to move, I like to roam. I'm not someone who likes to sit here for hours and hours just chilling, looking at an angle. And that kind of goes, you know, in the way of how Japanese players play airsoft. And I think I've touched on this before, I'm not sure, but Japanese players are, for the most part, pretty passive players. You don't really have those cringe kids like in America where they're just running around HPA spamming everybody. It's a very calculated and controlled game here in Japan. It's a very, you know, take the shots when you need to, maybe a little bit of tapping here and there, but no one's spamming BBs. There's actually a lot of fields that run BB limits. Some fields will do 100, some do 200, but getting off the point, a lot of Japanese players will just sit there and they'll hold an angle to the end of the time. They'll just hold lines and just watching lines. That's basically what they do. So it would make sense for them to have a variable optic, you know, especially when you're outdoors where your engagements can go beyond 50 meters, right? So it makes sense for them, but for me, I would say no. But let's talk about what like kind of the good and bad things objectively about having a magnifier. So of course, it's good in theory for engagements beyond 50 meters. But they are BBs, so I guess it doesn't really matter, but we'll talk about the cons after. But for 50 meters and beyond, especially if you're trying to get maybe like an angle on this really, really tight Rainbow Siege style angle, there's a guy peeking you from way across the map, and you just need that extra precision because you just can't quite see with your either your one time, so you just flip it up, get into the field of view, and then you have kind of a bigger view and know if your BBs are actually hitting or not. Know if you have to bring up the hop, or you have to bring up your gun a little bit. That's what it's good. It's good for like confirming if you're hitting as well. But I've only really found usefulness in it when I was peeking someone from far away at a specific angle, but they're just like running around or they're just chilling, you caught them in the flank. There's no need to use the magnified optic. So I would just use the one times, right? But if it's like a super tight angle and you need to just get that tight angle on them, I would say, yeah, it's good in theory for that. You could also use it in a different way, which I've seen some people do or end up doing, is you just have it canted like this, and then you can, you know, just flip it up and just gather intel that way. So it's really good for like intel. So you just want to know, okay, where are the enemies? Okay, I see two over there, two over here. So that's where it's good to have a magnifier for that. But at that point, why do you even have it on? If you're just gonna have that extra weight, maybe just bring a pair of actual binoculars, little cheap ones as well. It can give you the same idea, especially if you're not buying replicas and you're spending, you know, upward $400, $500, $1,000 on glass, just to use it as a glorified binocular. I wouldn't say it's worth it for airsoft in that respect. But yeah, for like outdoors, you know, it's good for long range engagements and knowing if your BBs are actually hitting due to wind and, you know, variations in trajectory and stuff like that as well. one thing I would say is that it is better than a variable scope in terms of its versatility, of course. So with a variable scope or a low-powered optic, a 1-6 or something like that, or a 1-12 or whatever. The thing is that unlike a red dot, even though you could go 1 times, right, and just leave it at 1 time, so it's the same as my EOTech or whatever, right? The thing is that you don't have the field of view, right? So when you have this EOTech in this large viewing window, and since there's no recoil in airsoft, a lot of players will just play like this, and you have those weird angles you got to go by. I can see the reticle from here, right? I don't have to be dead on to look at my reticle. I can just kind of cheat around a little bit. It is airsoft, right? So I don't need to be dead on like this and have the good. Actually, with the GVB, yeah, you probably should have a little bit of respect for the stance and shooting form, which I tend to do. But this field of view is really nice because there's no scope shade, there's no scope shadow, and you can just see your reticle from almost any angle, right? So that eye relief is really good, as opposed to when you switch to your high-powered or your low-powered optic. You have to close one eye to actually see what's going on, because if you don't, you're gonna get this weird astigmatism effect, right? So you gotta close your eyes so you lose your peripheral vision already, right? And you have to have the perfect eye relief in order to actually see through your optic. So in my opinion, having the option between when you go to CQB, you have all the versatility on those angles, right? And then when you need to, you can just throw it up for like a long angle very specifically. But it really just depends on how you play and what kind of field you're playing at. I wouldn't recommend it for indoors, obviously. But let's talk about some cons. One, obviously, weight, okay? So this is my MWS, right? My MWS M4A1 by Tokyo Marui. This thing weighs quite a lot, much more than an AEG, right? Because there's an actual bolt, there's a bolt system and everything like that. It's full metal. Magazine is as heavy as a full magazine full of 5.56, right? So having all this weight, you'll be walking around and stuff like that. It doesn't feel that bad. You feel kind of chunky. You feel like, yeah, I got this in the bag, right? But even your ADS time, I know it sounds cringe because it sounds like Modern Warfare or whatever, but your ADS time is actually slowed down quite a bit. It is slowed down quite a bit. So if you're playing CQB or a field outdoor that has a CQB, like a CQB area, you're gonna find trouble unless you work out. You're gonna find trouble pulling up that optic. So even if I know it sounds like me, but even then, like just presenting the weapon for me, I can feel so much more resistance trying to put it up. If I were to take it off, let's take this big boy off. If I were to take it off, it's so much more lighter, so much faster. I can transition much faster. And it's one of those, like, when it's off, but you don't notice it when it's on kind of weights. So I would definitely consider the weight when you're adding stuff like magnifiers to your system. Now, we talked about the field of view being a little bit cheese, right? We talked about, eye relief as well, right? So the fact that you have to look with one eye to actually see through it, and if you're hard scoping, I've gotten shot in the face before because I got cocky with with the eagle peak, and then I just get K'd. So you get K'd that way because you don't see what's actually happening around you. So just gotta be wary of that. And of course, the idea that replicas are not as good as the real steel thing, because this is layers of glass, right? And when you buy cheap, you get what you pay for. So I only spent maybe like $120 on this replica, and it's decent. It's okay. It's good for like maybe an AEG. I wouldn't use it on, my MWS, because even with the AEG before, when I was using it on something like my MCX here, right? I can't actually mount it on here right now, but when I was using it on my MCX before, there's no recoil on this thing, right? There's no recoil at all. So, there's nothing to really make the glass move around and make it shift around and lose the zero, or the visual zero, anyway, the aesthetic zero. So for an AEG, I'd say it's fine. But for something like a gas blowback, or maybe even an NGRS being the G Sedai, that recoil might actually shift these pieces of glass around. So just be wary of that you might have to be adjusting your visual aesthetic zero on your optic, or just buy a real one. Would I recommend to buy a real steel one? No, because what we talked about before, it's just not worth the money for the engagements that you will likely be shooting at. It really just depends on your playstyle, right? So like I said before, like when I use an optic, I become way more passive, and I understand that for passive players, it might be good, right? But if you're a player that likes to run around and get into the action and stuff like that, I wouldn't say it's worth the extra weight. I wouldn't say it's worth using it as a glorified binocular. Does it look cool? Yes, it does. Is it heavy? Yes, it is. And the thing is, it can still get shot out, right? It can still get shot out, and then what? You just lost $1,000. Oh, it's lifetime warranty, bro. It's like COVID right now, so like you're not gonna be using your optic for like a year if it gets shot out, right? I did put a little bit of a polycarbonate on top of here because there's not really any Lexan covers here in Japan. So for those of you saying, where'd you get a Lexan cover? There's no Lexan covers here. So they're all polycarbonate. But yeah, honestly, like, just to wrap it all up, do you need a magnified optic? No, definitely not. You don't. Is it worth getting? Depends on your playstyle. If you're a passive player, yes. If you are an aggressive player, I'd say no. Depends who you play. If you play outdoors in like the woods, I'd say yes. For the woods and you can't see anything, I would 100% recommend. I would even recommend getting a magnifier just to have it. Because it's hard to see people, bro. It's really hard to see people. Like, is that a bush or is that a person? Or you can just get a pair of binoculars. But if you don't want to do that and just want to keep your rig kind of clean, then yeah, you could get a magnifier. Would I recommend getting a real steel one? If you have an AEG, no, there's no recoil, so I guess your little cheap one, at least spend $100 on it. Don't get like a $5 one. It can handle the no recoil of your everyday shots. For a gas blowback, at least for replica, at least get it $100 and up one. And if you're just swimming in cash or you have one for some reason, yes, go for real steel if you can, right? Just make sure you put a polycarbonate because it will get shot out, right? You don't want that to happen. But for me and my playstyle, you know, it's more fun for me to just move up and actually push, take ground, practice clearing, practice tactics, practice moving with my team and doing all that stuff. It's better for me. Honestly, it's better for me to not use the magnifier because I have snipers on my team to do that. I have all the Japanese players here to do that as well. But anyway, guys, remember that at the end of the day, just slinging plastic. And honestly, most of your shots gonna miss anyway, especially if you're outdoor, because every BB is 3-to-1 out there. But indoor CQB, yeah, most of the time your shots will hit. Especially if you have a Tokyo Marui, right? Most of the time your shots will hit, and you have tracers anyway to know if your shots are hitting. You're not gonna be using a magnifier inside. I actually see people playing with magnifiers inside. And CQB in Japan is not light. I mean, CQB in Japan is not wide, okay? It's a very, very tight space, so something like an MP5 would be good. Would you put a magnifier in the MP5? I guess if you wanted a meme. Well, anyway, guys, that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about Airsoft, I guess you could ask me, I guess. I've only been playing for a year, but I played a lot in a year, so I feel like I've been playing for years. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comment section down below. Comments, questions, concerns, all that fun stuff. Remember, guys, the motto of this channel, get a real gun.